Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What do we wait for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
Welcome one and all my geeks and geekettes, to this edition of Geek Therapy Radio. What episode is this? I want to say, is it 106, I think? Something like that. We're getting up there. Well past 100 broadcasts of Geek Therapy Radio, so it means the world to me that you join me each week. If you're a new listener, it means the world to me that you continue to join me each week following. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger, and this week is pretty much Space Week. There's been so much news in the past week around space and space exploration. Israel tried to put a lunar lander on the moon. It failed, but it isn't exactly the bad story. It's not as bad as you think it is. Israel did not lose any of their gumption for going to the moon again. They actually had a very bright outlook on it. They say, yeah, our lunar lander failed, quote unquote failed, but we got to the moon. And Israel has never gotten to the moon before. Neither has hardly any other countries besides the United States. Some have, some haven't, but Israel's a very small country with, as they put it, very big dreams. So my applause to Israel for even putting an object on the moon. That is an amazing first step for Israel. SpaceX did the first commercial space flight, how can I pronounce this? Commercial successful space flight. They put a communication satellite up in orbit, and they returned all three of their booster cores to the Earth safely. Their reusable rocket boosters back to the Earth safely. One landed on their drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean, and the other two landed back on their landing pads on land. So that is an amazing feat in itself. I highly recommend you Google SpaceX launch and drone landings or whatever on Google and watch these rocket boosters return to Earth and land by themselves to be used again. It really is remarkable. And there's all sorts of other things that's happened in space news this week, but perhaps the biggest thing, not even perhaps the biggest thing, the biggest space news this week has been the first ever photographed image of a black hole. It is a monumental moment for space exploration and for physics in general. Basically, this photo proved the math that is decades old, proved it to be true. Einstein was right. Einstein's been right about a lot of things, but this is the first visible evidence that the mathematics and the theories all checked out. We said the mathematics showed that this should exist in this sort of way, and this photograph proved that it does in fact exist exactly the way the math theorized it to, and Einstein theorized it to exist. So in the next segment, in segment 2 of Geek Therapy Radio and segment 3, I have Dr. Carolyn Sumners from the Houston Museum of Natural Science. In segment 2, we're going to talk about that image of the black hole, and we're going to make sense of it. So if you listen to segment 2 coming up here in just a few minutes, Dr. Carolyn Sumners, she's the Curator of Astronomy at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. She's going to clarify things because, when the first photo came out, when the photo came out earlier this week, I've heard some people around the office, kind of halfway joking that the photo's not very impressive. It's just a fuzzy ring. It's like, I know you're halfway joking about this, but it's not what the photo is. I mean, it is what it is. It's not what the photo is. It's what it represents. This photo is monumental. This is almost like looking into the eye of God himself. This basically proved decades of theory. Proved it. So it's not that it's just a blurry circle with a dark center inside of it. We're looking at an actual black hole. It's in the M87 galaxy in the Virgo region of space. We're looking at a black hole. Those photons and radio waves and all that came to Earth, and it's 55 million light years away, and we have visible evidence now proving black holes. It almost makes me speechless with how monumental that photo is for humanity in space exploration, period. I put the photo of the black hole right up there with the moon landing as far as how monumental and how important this is to space exploration. Now we can see a black hole. And on that note, there has been a name associated with this black hole. Her name is Katie Bowman. Katie Bowman is the MIT graduate who developed the algorithm that allowed the eight telescopes and hundreds of astronomers to resolve the image of this black hole 55 million light years away. She developed the algorithm that contained all the mathematical formulas and functions that allowed to process this data to resolve the image of the black hole. The data spread across dozens of hard drives. It is a massive amount of information measured in terabytes that was used and collected to resolve this little quote-unquote blurry image of a black hole. And Katie Bowman is responsible for that. She developed that algorithm that made it possible. Every article that I've read about the black hole, Katie Bowman's name was front and center, as it should be. I'm super happy. The more women in STEM fields I'm very happy about, I get thrilled about. STEM fields should not just be, a man's game. And I highly encourage any women to get into it. If they're even remotely fascinated with science or technology or physics or anything, of course, STEM, yes, please. So it's amazing to see women doing great things in STEM fields. So Katie Bowman, I've seen her name in every article, but you go on Facebook, what do you see? Divisiveness. I read an article on Facebook somebody posted that says Katie Bowman's name isn't coming up in any articles about the black hole. And I wanted to pull my bald hair out. What are you talking about? I've seen her name everywhere. In every single article I've seen Katie Bowman's name. She is prominently brought to the forefront of every single article I've read about this. Why are you trying to create this division when no division was there? Where have you been looking? What articles have you been reading that Katie Bowman's name hasn't been front and center? Everything that I've read has had her name front and center, as it should be, because she deserves all the credit. You know who else deserves a lot of credit? Dr. Carolyn Sumners. She's going to join me in the next segment. We are going to make sense of the black hole. We're going to wrap it around for the way that laymen can understand. It's a very fascinating conversation. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. As always, I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, showing you around the Museum of the Mind. And I have an actual curator on the line with me, the Curator of Astronomy. Is that right, Dr. Carolyn?
That's good enough.
Good enough. Dr. Carolyn Sumners from the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And she is going to help us understand all of this information we've been seeing the past few days about the newly photographed black hole. So, Dr. Carolyn Sumners, what kind of light can you shed on this? Black holes don't shed lights in their interior, but we've been able to see the event horizon, so to speak. So what can you tell us about the black hole, and what kind of, forgive the pun, but what kind of weight does this have for astronomy?
We have been talking about black holes for an awfully long time. And we've had all kind of science fiction written about them, all kind of wormholes, all this stuff written. And then one has to face the fact that no one had seen one because they don't emit light.
Yeah.
Nothing escapes them, not even light waves. Therefore, the goal was to figure out a way to see one, to photograph one, to get an image that said that is a black hole.
Yeah.
Well, the black hole itself can't be seen, but its shadow can.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's there, and all we have to do is get a big enough one. Mm-hmm. And the one in the galaxy M87 is quite large, 6 billion suns worth. That's a good number. We'll take that.
Yeah.
And it would hold the whole solar system. It's a really big object, and that would do just fine. Then we had to figure out how we were going to image it. Now, it's tricky. Radio waves are the easiest to put together, so we can string all these radio observatories around the world together, 8 of them, and all look at the same thing at the same time. which, if you play your computer algorithms right, will give you a better image than any single one can give you.
Yeah.
You can combine the images and you get a telescope, effectively a dish, the width of the Earth itself, just about.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. But you have to have weather the same and good at all 8 locations at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And April is about the only month where this is even possible. And so this is what took so long. And they did the observing run in 2017 that actually gave the data we used in mid-April, about 10 days worth of data running on the object, trying to get a time when there was the minimum amount of water in the air. Water is terrible for radio waves.
Yeah.
So is everything else, for that matter, but water especially. And at any rate, we got all the data, put it all together, and the goal would be to get rid of all of the things that shouldn't be there in the data, and the result would be the real object.
Yeah.
And that's what happened, and that's what gave us our first image, where it's a real image.
Yeah.
We know the black hole is there. And I keep thinking about all of the years we've been teaching that object by that star has to be a black hole because material is falling into it, we can tell that, and the object is going around something, we can tell that, but we're not seeing the black hole.
Yeah.
Well, now we can say, yes, Einstein was right, our theories are right,
Yes.
black holes do exist because we got a picture of one.
That is, to me, that's the most profound aspect of all of this. Someone walking around the station halfway, they were just halfway joking the other day that it's just a blurry halo. And I said, but it's not just that it's a blurry halo. It's not just the image itself. It's what the image represents and how groundbreaking this is. To me, and maybe you can, you might agree with this, that this is the most groundbreaking observation in astronomy that I can think of in the last, I would argue maybe perhaps decades. This is a huge discovery.
Yeah, I think our problem with this image is that we've done such a good job with the science fiction.
Yeah.
In other words, we've made so many wonderful black hole images that we use in our planetarium programs, that we have in our movies, and all these different ways of going into a black hole. We've just done such a great job showing a black hole where we never did really see one.
Right.
That people go to look at the real thing, which is very far away, and go hum hum.
Yeah.
Yet it was the most impressive about it. What if it hadn't been there?
Yeah.
What if we'd photographed this thing and no black spot appeared in the middle?
Right.
Our whole theory of science would have gone away. So it was very important at some point to have your theory matched by a real picture of something.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. As much as anything else, it is a very spectacular image. I think, now the colors are not real, they're false colored. These are radio waves. And the more yellow the part of the image is, the more intense radio waves. And then the darker parts are less intense. So we kind of know how the material is swirling around this black hole. And we get an idea of what's falling in. The one thing we always know is the mass of the black hole.
Yeah.
And we always have some kind of idea of its angular momentum, of its spin. We don't know anything else, and we can't.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably the most fundamental, thing about astronomy. That black hole is gone. It doesn't exist in our universe. It's not part of our space-time.
How many millions of light years away is it? It's something like 80 million light years away.
Yes,
something
I don't
like
have that right there. It's the distance of M87.
Yeah.
Someone can look that up in great detail.
Yeah.
You can see this galaxy with a modest telescope as a fuzzy spot.
Right.
It's a big galaxy, and it's a big black hole, and it's face on. It's exactly how you want to photograph it. And so it made it the perfect first target. And we had used radio telescopes to detect jets coming out around the black hole before. So we had some practice with it, but not with this many telescopes.
Yeah.
So it was a very ambitious plan. The computers had to be right to put all of these images together. And they are. And we got an image. I think we'll get the center of our own galaxy soon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's not as big, closer, but it's in the middle of a lot more dust. See,
right.
You've got stuff between you and the black hole that you've got to remove from the data.
Yeah.
And that's radio waves, because they're such long wavelength waves, can penetrate where other wavelengths of light get obstructed by what they run into.
Yeah.
Radio waves are more, in many ways, more penetrating, and for that reason, we had a chance of finding this thing. And what's exciting is we did.
Yeah. And so what's also extremely fascinating is I looked it up just now. Galaxy M87. It's in the Virgo region. It's 55 million light years from Earth. So that black hole is probably long gone by now. We are looking back in time 55 million years at it, which means if some planet around in that galaxy was looking at us, they would see us 55 million years ago, which is just about the time of the dinosaur, a little bit after the dinosaurs went extinct. But they'd be seeing us from a very long time ago. But
I'm sure the hole's still there. I mean, I don't think there's any question that it's still there.
Right.
It's bigger.
But it's 55 million years more mature than it is than what we can observe right now. It's all very.
And we're talking about the galaxy that universe. The universe, the time the universe we know has existed. The timelines of astronomy are the space and timelines of astronomy are so much greater than normal human experience.
Absolutely, we human existence, all of human existence, period, is not even the blink of an eye on the atomic scale right now. What I was saying about the black hole we photograph now, 55 million light years away. Can you imagine what we can get a closer picture of our own black hole eventually? What kind of mysteries that would reveal in our own backyard?
Well, I think it's going to look. I think the most important characteristic of a black hole is nothing.
Yeah.
In other words, it doesn't reveal anything. That's what's so frustrating. You think about, we'll just send a probe inside that black hole.
Yeah.
That's what we do so well.
Right.
Why couldn't we someday in the future do that? Well, simple. You send in the probe, no problem. Probe falls right on in. But the probe can't send any information back.
Right.
And so how we find out about what these different, the surface of Pluto and all kind of things we get is that we get data back in wavelengths of light that we collect and we can process the data. Nothing's coming out of that black hole.
Absolutely.
And the one that's of our galaxy, nothing's coming out of it either. What it represents is a place where our universe no longer exists and cannot be detected, and we can't study it. And I think that's such a, for physicists, for scientists, maybe for all of us, it's, we don't want to limit.
Yeah.
We've never wanted things to limit us.
Right.
Like that does.
Dr. Sumners, can you stick around for one more segment? We can talk about the new moon landing exhibit opening at the Houston Museum of Natural Science.
I'd love to.
All right, that's Dr. Carolyn Sumners. She's going to join us for one more segment. We're going to take a brief break here, and we'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. Talk about the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be doing this show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, here with the astronomy curator of the Houston Museum of Natural Science, Dr. Carolyn Sumners. And in the last segment, we talked about wrapping our minds around and clarifying what happened with all this black hole news about the black hole we just photographed, how groundbreaking that was. But in this segment, we are going to talk about something else just as groundbreaking as far as human exploration of the final frontier is concerned. The 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And Dr. Sumners, there's something awesome going on at the museum soon. Can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a lot awesome going on. But there's two things that actually are going on right now for next week.
Okay.
We are going to put right in the middle of the entry hallway, not the hall you walk down, but when you go right inside the main museum, the big, tall space, used to have a dinosaur in it long, long ago. Mm-hmm. Now it's going to have one really big, 23-foot wide, glowing moon.
Neat.
And the texture of the moon is from Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, so it has all the resolution you could want, and it'll be like seeing the moon really for the first time, up close, something we would love to all do. Maybe someday we all will.
Yeah.
But for right now, this is about as good as we can get. So we've done two things that I think are kind of cool. From the mezzanine especially, you really get this huge, wonderful view of the moon. And you have all these craters and everything, and we have charts where you can actually figure out what they are. we also have touch things, and there are these little pieces of what look like rock, and you can touch them. They come from the moon.
Wow.
They are meteorites that came to Earth. One of them came from near the landing site of Apollo 16. So you can't go to the moon now. You can't land on the moon now, but you can touch this, and this was on the moon.
You can actually touch a piece of the moon.
Touch 3 pieces of the moon.
Wow.
One of them is from the near side, for sure, Apollo 16 area, Descartes. One is pretty close with positive. It's from the far side of the moon, which you couldn't ever see if you even wanted to until you go to the moon. And the third piece was actually dug out by one meteor impact. It began 200 miles below the surface of the moon, and then a second meteor hit it again and knocked it to the Earth. And so it's from the inside of the moon. Well, we couldn't think of anything for the fourth side, so we got a Mars rock. So you will also be able to touch a rock that began its life on the planet Mars.
Wow.
Well, we can't go to these places yet. We can hope for the future, but we can touch them in the Museum of Natural Science. And while we're looking at the big, gorgeous moon, and I did all of the craters for the far side, just finished this little project for a sign, and I thought, I'll never see these.
Yeah.
Unless I could go out and this is not so far-fetched,
to
ride a rocket and do a gravitational orbit. It would just be a natural free-fall orbit around the moon, and you'd get to see the far side. Something humans will never see until we go there.
Yeah. Because
the moon is locked with the near side and the far side.
The
other thing we're doing is at the same time we're opening a new planetarium show. We had to figure out what to do with the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and we recognized, first of all, that there's a whole bunch of hardware down the street from us at Johnson Space Center.
Yeah.
That's their story. Let's tell the story that begins with Apollo, not ends with it.
Right.
So we decided to call our planetarium show To Defy Gravity, and the Apollo astronauts are the first ones to escape the gravity field of Earth.
Wow.
And gravity is such a powerful story that we look at, well, what happens when we defy gravity again? What's the experiment going to be like in the future? We actually had Walter Cronkite telling the story of astronauts having fun on the moon.
Neat.
Quote, defying gravity. And so we have that in place. Then we follow it by what a future moon landing could be. Then we say, well, hey, we're just rolling a roll here. Let's see what it would be like to defy gravity on every planet in the solar system, or at least the surface of a moon if we can't land on the planet.
Cool.
And finally, we thought, gravity waves, gravitational waves.
Yeah.
They are so fascinating. They're as fascinating as the black hole story. And they show how much we now know about this gravity field that has defined us.
Yeah.
And nothing has made us who we are more than the gravity of Earth that it held us in the ocean. Life managed to escape to the land.
Right.
It held life on the land. Life figured out how to build a rocket and escape to go to the moon.
Held the atmosphere.
It holds our atmosphere. If we have less, like the moon, less mass, less gravity pull, we don't have an atmosphere.
Right.
So much we know. I think we know more about electricity and magnetism. We know more about even maybe what the particles are inside an atom than we really do about the most fundamental force of all, the one you're sitting there feeling right now.
Right.
The force, downward pull of gravity from the Earth, and the gravitational pull that is making everything happen in our universe. So that's what the story's about. And we're just very excited to have a big moon and then to talk about the first astronauts by going to the moon, defying the gravity field of Earth.
When does the exhibit open?
The exhibit opens on the 19th.
Okay.
And so does the planetarium show.
That is wonderful. And so
do them both.
Both of them. So April 19th, I believe that's a Friday.
It is a Friday,
yep.
Yes.
And I will be there, and I'm going to bring my wife if her schedule allows. And
oh, please do.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is great for the kids. One thing we urge when you're looking at the moon is most people have a grandparent who was there.
Yeah.
Who saw Apollo, who heard the TV, who listened to the story, and what did they feel like? What was the experience like? Is a wonderful story to compare the today and back then.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most impressive things I've heard over and over again was it was spectacular. We were excited, but we thought it was the beginning of something that was going to happen fast.
Yeah.
We thought we will be everywhere by the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Because look how long that is, and look how fast we got to the moon.
Yeah.
And then we didn't go anywhere.
Right.
So it's a very interesting feeling of how much humans can do and how much humans will do.
So that brings up an interesting point that just popped into my head. My grandmother is 96 years old. She's been around for all of it. She's still very sharp and very cute and remembers everything. My great-grandmother passed away. She was 101. She was born in 1899, so she passed away in 2000. She was also sharp and all there and witnessed all of this happening. But my grandmother, we were talking recently about the moon landing and going to the moon, and it seems that her and some other, I'll just say, elderly folks don't see why we should go back to the moon. It seems to me that some think that it's a waste of time and resources. Not just elderly. There's a few people that might think that funding NASA and exploring space is a waste of time. Can you shed some light on why it absolutely is not a waste of time to explore space and possibly go back to the moon and beyond?
Well, I've got to first tell you about my 96-year-old mother, who has passed, but she would happily have given I was an only child, my entire inheritance to get to go around the moon.
Yeah.
She wanted to do that so much. So I think what you're looking at is a breadth of human interest.
Yeah.
And what are the reasons for going? It's certainly if we say, hey, we're just going to stay on the Earth forever. Well, most people don't want that. They want to believe that we can leave, that they could leave, that the moon could become a place they could at least go on a trip and visit. And so the moon is basically Earth. It was spun off the Earth. It's sterile. We have to learn what to do about the dust, but otherwise the moon is fairly easy in the grand scheme to figure out how to get there and what to do with it when you do. We have to build the habitats. But at some point, I think it may be the tourism. It may be the expansion of the human experience that causes us to go to the moon. And if that can be the case, what's good about it is that the person who doesn't want to go doesn't pay.
Right.
If we can take it to the point that the people who want to experience as much as they can experience in their lives, and that would include the weightlessness of the trip and the feeling of being on another world, we need to get it where they could pay for that.
Yeah.
Then we'll have something that really is truly equitable.
Yeah.
I think this is a problem with government anyway. We don't want the government to pay for things that we think are silly.
Right.
And I think if people don't want to go to the moon, we need to work to the point that it's not something they have to affect with their tax dollars pay for.
Right.
At the same time, the moon is also going to give us different resources.
Yes.
It is the gateway. We're building a space station called the Gateway right now that will go in lunar orbit. It is the gateway for humans to leave the Earth-Moon system.
Bingo.
So it's the start of the trip of the passage outward, and how long it takes, and depends upon how we learn how to capture energy and how we learn how to travel. But it is step one, and I think it would be a shame to say we're just going to sit on the Earth and never take it.
Yeah, I 100%, we're going to wrap up the interview here, but I 100% agree that we talk about going to Mars. Well, we go to Mars by 2030, 2050. Well, we can't talk about going to Mars without going back to the moon and figuring out how to sustain life on the moon, basically. You're absolutely right. The gateway, the pathway to the stars starts at the moon. Dr. Carolyn Sumners, thank you so much for coming on Geek Therapy Radio this week. As always, it's an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you. Come see us.
Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm just laughing at some research I'm doing on this segment. You know, we're all geeks about something, and one of those geek things is certainly airplanes. Fast planes, slow planes, supersonic jets, subsonic jets, props, turboprops, all sorts of airplane stuff. I certainly am a nerd about planes. I'm a big-time geek about planes. I would love to get my pilot's license. The thing about that is, it's very expensive. And I've tried to... Well, I tried once. to see if maybe a flight school would like to sponsor the show and maybe help me get a pilot's license in some roundabout way. Help me out with that, but I didn't hear back from the only flight school I checked with. Initially, the owner of the airport was pretty interested, but it's a numbers game. When you talk to people about a radio show, it's a numbers game. Most will not be interested, and some will. So maybe I should ask more airports if they want to work out some sort of agreement. But I would love to get my pilot's license. Roughly, it costs $10,000, $12,000. It's not uncommon to get your pilot's license. That's a lot of money. But regardless, I am quite a geek about airplanes. I have many hundreds, if not thousands of hours of flight simulator under my belt. And I know it might sound a little geeky, which it is geeky, and it's glorious. But it might sound like kind of a waste of time. Why do you put so many hours into that? You could actually be learning, just assuming that money is no factor. When I went on my first exploratory flight with an instructor, which I guess I'll share that story in a second, I asked him, before we left the ground, I said, I hope this doesn't sound like kind of a stupid question, but I'll kick myself if I don't ask it anyways. I told him about all the hours, thousands of hours I have in Flight Simulator and everything I do in Flight Simulator and how I fly from airport to airport and use the GPS and all the different aspects that I control because I try to keep it as realistic, quote unquote, as possible in Flight Simulator. And he says, you know what? A lot of people are afraid to ask that question, but the answer is that absolutely yes. All that experience in Flight Simulator will definitely help you in flight school and will save you a lot of money. So the more experience you have in flight simulators on your computer, the better off you'll do in flight school and the more money you'll save. And I said, oh, why is that? Even though I kind of already knew the answer to it. He said, because you have it's familiarity with the instruments, with the 6-pack, with the altimeter, turn coordinator, altimeter, all sorts of things. Hold on, I need to pause this because the phone's ringing and I guarantee you there's no one on the other line. It was worse than nobody on the other line. It was Randy Lemon. The garden line guy. The garden weasel, as we call him around here. Interrupting my flow. The altimeter, the airspeed indicator. You know what? Who cares? All I'm saying is that the instructor said that actually having experience in Flight Simulator will help you with flight training and help you with school and hours and everything because you'll have familiarity with instrumentation and you'll have a basic familiarity with takeoff speed, landing speed, how much flap to put in on landing or not to put in on landing and runways and everything like that. Basically, all you have to learn is radios if you don't already know it and some other things. But having familiarity with Flight Simulator will help you in your actual real-world flight training. So, being a geek about flight simulators can actually help you in life. Isn't that neat? Why am I bringing all this up? Why am I talking about airplane stuff? Because I read a funny story. This goes back to the research I was talking about, where a Dutch fighter pilot, during an exercise, accidentally flew into his own bullets. Have you ever thought about that? How when a fighter pilot firing his machine gun, in this case it was a 20 millimeter machine gun that fires up to 6,000 rounds per minute, even though the airplane, which was an F-16, only carries 510 rounds, which is enough for about 5 seconds of brrrr. Anyways, have you ever thought about when you fire the bullets that eventually maybe the resistance of air slows down the bullets so that now they are traveling slower than the plane and theoretically you can fly your own airplane into your own bullets? How many times do you think that's happened? I would not fault you for thinking that almost never happens, or that has never happened, that this Dutch pilot flying into his own bullets was the first time it happened. No one would fault you for that. You'd think that it's such a rare happening that it's not worth... It just never entered your brain. But in this case, the Dutch pilot did fly into his own bullets. He fired on a target out there in one of the Dutch islands, and basically he nosed down and throttled up and wound up flying through a cloud of his own bullets. It's very strange. He survived. The plane survived. It had a bullet or two in the fuselage, and one of the engines, or the engine, ingested another bullet or two at least, but he landed the plane safely. This is not the first time. Well, it's the first time that pilot did it, but this is not the first time, hopefully. This is not the first time that an airplane, the fighter jet, has flown through its own bullets. It happened also in 2017. I'm sorry, it was 1956. Samsonite. I was way off. Anyways, yeah, it happened in 1956. It was a Grumman F-11 Tiger, and in that case, the pilot shot out of his four 20 millimeter cannons over the Atlantic, or towards the Atlantic Ocean. He entered a steep dive, kicked in the afterburners, went supersonic, and all of a sudden his windshield blew out of his airplane, and the engine failed because it sucked up bullets, and bullets went crashing through the windshield. And in that case, that pilot did shoot himself down with his own bullets. At least the Dutch pilot landed safely. He could have shot himself down, but he didn't, thankfully, for that pilot. I don't know. I just thought that was a funny story because you don't really think about that. Can a pilot shoot a bullet and then catch up to it with his own airplane? The answer is yes, and it has happened a few times, documented, most recently back in February of this year. I just thought that was an interesting story. Let's move on. Here's something that will surprise nobody. DVD and Blu-ray sales have been cut in half over the past 5 years. Interesting, fascinating. I wonder why that could possibly be happening. Netflix, Steam, Hulu, Amazon Prime. You get my point. That is a story that has not surprised anybody. Moving on, I love it when companies just get silly. Honda makes, motorcycles and cars and all sorts of things that go very, very, very fast. Honda is it's setting its sights on building a lawnmower that goes over 150 miles per hour. They're aiming for the record of the world's fastest lawnmower. Man, that would cut your grass so fast. Probably corners horribly, though. Blast down a strip of your lawn, try to take a corner at 150 miles an hour. So it's going to be powered by a 1,000cc inline four-cylinder that's good for 190 horsepower. Remember, I'm grabbing the mic. We're talking about a lawnmower right now. 190 horsepower lawnmower. It's using a Fireblade engine. It's the Mean Mower version 2, because Honda teamed up with Top Gear recently back in 2013 and made a lawnmower that the Stig drove that went over 116 miles per hour. So Honda's like, you know what if we do this in earnest? We'll actually build one ourselves that does 150. A Norwegian team actually stuffed a 408 horsepower LS1 V8 from a Corvette into a lawnmower, and I guess you would call it at that point a lawn motor, and put a roll cage on it and went down an airstrip at 134 miles per hour. So Honda is going to do more with less, 190 horsepower, trying to reach over 150 miles per hour. And the best part of it is, does it cut grass? Hell yeah, it cuts grass. They got a blade on it. It's a functioning lawnmower. Or it will be when they build it, but it's... Oh, I love that. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I've been your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Make sure you check out the Houston Museum of Natural Science and their new moon landing exhibit. It's going to be amazing. Have a great week, everybody.